press it when the red light's on. If not, you can talk.
Good morning. I'd like to call the Finance, Ways and Means Committee to order for February 15th, 2023, and welcome all of you here who've joined us bright and early this morning. We do appreciate it. And Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Representatives Barrett, Boyd, Campbell, Camper, Cochran, Crawford, Faison, Freeman, Gant, Garrett, Hawk, Hicks, Kiesling, Lamberth, Love, Lynn, McKenzie, Miller, Moon, Parkinson, Shaw, Sparks, Whitson, Williams, Zachary, Vice Chairman Baum, Chair Lady Hazelwood. Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And for the record, Representative Garrett and Leader Lamberth are stuck in traffic. They are waiting for the choice lane. Hopefully they'll get here before those are built, but I think it just underscores the problems that we have in the state related to traffic, but they are on their way. Are there any personal orders or announcements? Chairman Kiesling.
Thank you, Chair Lady. There are many out here that are my friends and friends to all of us up here, but there's one special lady that is out there in that audience that we'll probably hear from later. But she's a childhood friend, and we grew up together. It's Carol Bird Clark from Pickett, originally from Pickett County. She's Assistant Vice President of Government Relations for Austin Peay. So, Carol, thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Thank you, Chair Lady.
Well, welcome, Carol, and welcome to all our educators. And I would just like to take a moment of personal privilege. I also see Kim McCormick in the audience today. And on Friday, I had the honor of being at an event honoring her husband, Gerald, our former beloved leader, as we named a building at Chattanooga State after him, which was a fitting honor. And it was a great afternoon, a beautiful day, and just so happy to see Gerald there and all the family and to have that building. The sign is large enough, I truly believe you can see it as you're coming in at the airport to land. So it's very visible. Gerald McCormick, loud and proud. So we're very happy to do that. Seeing no other personal orders or announcements, we have several budget hearings scheduled today, so we're going to go out of session and get right to those. We are beginning with the Tennessee Higher Ed Commission, and members, what our plan is we will have questions for each of these entities after their presentation, because I don't know about you, but my mind won't hold questions that long as we have a number of presentations to go through. So we will stop after each presentation and have questions of the group, and we will ask them if they don't mind to hang in until higher ed is complete in case we have some follow-up questions that come up later. But with that, I'd like to introduce the folks from THEC. I think we have our interim director that I just had the opportunity to meet outside, Dr. Smith. So welcome, and introduce the folks with you, and we'll just ask you to tell us about the things that are going on in your organization.
Good. Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Bob Smith. I am the interim executive director of the Tennessee Higher Education Commission. I started on January the 3rd. I was used to counting the number of days, now counting the number of weeks that I've been in the position. So it is a privilege to have with me an outstanding team of very seasoned veterans. You know Dr. Stephen Gentile, who is our Chief Policy Officer, Mr. Lou Hannum, who is the Chief of Staff, Legislative Liaison, both my right and my left arm, Mr. Scott Sloan, General Counsel, Mr. Jason Cavender, Chief Fiscal Officer, and there are other people in the audience. It's an honor to be with you today and to represent the recommendations from the commission members themselves representing this amazing organization. It's worth reminding you from the outset that we have a specific mission for higher education, and that is to relentlessly focus on increasing the number of Tennesseans with a post-secondary credential. Since 2013, the metric for how we do that has been set by the Drive for 55, established under Governor Haslam, and continued successfully under Governor Lee. Progress to this goal has been steady. There's been occasional bumps in recent years, but none of that has prevented us from the relentless work to meet that mission. There have been serendipitous gains along the way that have benefited the people of Tennessee from that original single metric. The Drive to 55 has inspired continued innovation, relentless outreach, and an army of volunteers who have invested in helping young people, adults of all ages, and our military veterans think about their skills, advance their credentials, and make lifelong education a part of their lives. And behind me are the men and women of the institutions that actually deliver the education to those populations, who every day are driven by their respective mission to enrich the lives of Tennessee and to grow our economy so that all can prosper. I'm unique in the sense that I had the position that many of them hold, and so I understand with great empathy their work and the difficulty of their task, and I have admiration for their resolve and commitment to our students, faculty, staff, and alumni. You can't do their job if you take it as a job. It is personal. It is from a deep-seated sense of purpose that rises above personal interest. Collectively, we are grateful that year over year, this legislature and the governors have thoughtfully and generously put post-secondary education as a priority, not only for funding, but for well-constructed policies that assure strong stewardship of our taxpayers' dollars. Being the interim, I'm in a somewhat unique position. This is the first time that I've presented on behalf, and it could very well be the last time. I began this journey by reaching out to hear from others, listen to stakeholders, and gather impressions of what others see as the expectation and opportunities for the Tennessee Higher Education Commission. We are your agency responsible for assuring when institutions use public funds and are given the privilege of state authorization under our purview that they are given with intentional thought to how they plan, execute, and deliver quality education that benefits all Tennesseans. Inherent in our mission is to assure accountability for the resources we use and the outcomes that we expect. This is the agency that the state depends on for higher education data and analysis, and other agencies require for workforce planning, capital master planning, the recruitment of businesses to the state. We are the pivotal resource for the governor's workforce task force that is driving the engine of growth for Tennessee. We're also the agency that provides analysis and higher education oversight to you. The General Assembly and our post-secondary institutions, as they adjust to economic trends important to sustaining Tennessee's future. Through a balance of accountability and incentives, we assure thoughtful change within our institutions. We are also the early innovators for solving some of post-secondary's most challenging access and student success conundrums. Some of those programs we'll talk about today. We're here specifically today to talk about and address the budget for the coming fiscal year and provide background as well as commentary framed by the governor's budget. Overall, we are describing an enterprise of $5.5 billion in addition $1.2 billion of capital, most of which flows through or is accounted for by our agency in various ways. And so I'll go down through the different elements of that. We'll begin with 1.5.
And Dr. Smith, just in the interest of time, we have a number of presenters and we will have questions. So if you can, as quickly as possible without giving up quality, get us through the presentation, that'd be great.
All right. Well, $1.5 billion is set aside for the outcome performance or outcome-based formula. The governor has recommended full funding of this, and we appreciate that very much at $35 million. Funding additions to that come from the fact that the institutions have delivered on the promise of performance. $2.8 billion of the higher resources comes from tuition and fees. Since the Focus Act, the Commission has had the responsibility of establishing binding tuition fee ranges as part of assuring that our higher education commissioners will set those ranges in May. One strategic result of that authority has been the investment institutions have made in assuring greater affordability for people who attend their institutions, and I want to applaud those institutions for how they've addressed that. Capital projects remain an important aspect. The Commission recommended 11 capital projects for $551. The governor's budget funds 2 of the 11 related to inflationary pressure, and we appreciate he also included $111 billion in maintenance, a critical investment for our institutions. There's one initiative the Higher Education Commission requested that is not in the governor's budget, and that is $6 million for a statewide higher education facilities condition survey. It's been over a decade since we have had a comprehensive study of the facilities that are part of higher education. Fourth element is our operating budget. The Higher Education Commission approved an operating budget adjustment that included estimates to inflation as well as salary and other adjustments of $115 million. The governor has generously covered $63.8 million for a salary pool. The governor also included $11.1 million in inflationary adjustments, and we note this attention to inflation is an unusual item and appreciate very much the recognition that inflation has had as a real impact on our institutions. THEC not only provides stewardship for that $5.5 million, but for its own innovation and for its own initiatives in driving for our mission. And to do that, this is our momentum year. The goal for our momentum year through the programs that are administered directly delivered by THEC is to raise the going rate to 60% for this fall term, increase enrollment, and to also focus on specific workforce training. We're grateful for the governor's support of the programs that we support. Our board specifically supported the advised TN program at $925,000 of recurring. This is to address shortages in the program's ability to retain advisors, and we'd like to bring that specifically to your attention. In closing, I want to add a personal view. Education is a unique benefit we give Tennesseans that cannot be taken from them. No one can steal it away in the night. It is the perfect freedom in that persons can freely choose how to use it to realize their aspirations or their dreams. It is also the gift that brings back to its giver a return far greater than its expense. Within our mission, we understand that we're tasked with collaborating with all of our stakeholders to assure that this gift will be there for all Tennesseans. We are in an era in which having this gift is a nicety, is more than a nicety, it is a necessity. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. There's a lot of material in there, and I neglected to mention in the beginning, but members, all of the slides from Dr. Smith's presentation are available on dashboard, and you can see those there if you're having trouble with the screen. We do have questioners on the list, beginning with Chairman Whitson.
Thank you, Chair Lady Hazelwood, and I also like to thank Leader Faison for bringing us donuts this morning, and I also would like to blame Leader Faison for me being late and not hearing the first part of the introduction. So, but Director, good morning, and you mentioned briefly about the Drive to 55. Could you tell us a little bit more about the funding, what remains in the carry forward or reserves of the Drive to 55, and how would they be utilized, sir?
I'm going to ask Dr. Gentile to give you those details.
And I'm going to defer to Jason Cavender, our Chief Financial Officer.
If you would, sir, for the record, just identify your name and title.
Good morning. Jason Cavender, Chief Fiscal Officer, Tennessee Higher Education Commission. Yes, sir. We have some of the funding that Governor Haslam appropriated to THEC from a number. We have some of the funding that Governor Haslam appropriated to the Tennessee Higher Education Commission from a number of years ago. We have those funds programmed. They are currently under implementation of being distributed to the institutions for them to do things from summer outreach to from summer outreach to developmental programs to various levels of student engagement to ensure that not only are they prepared to come into the institution, but to keep them in the institution once they get there.
Chairman Whitson.
Yes, and do you have how much remains? How many funds are available?
Yes, sir. We have that. We can get that to you.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
If you would, and if you could just, you mentioned kind of the generalities. Can you point out some specific programs that funds?
Yes, we can get that to you with the dollar amounts and specific things that we have programmed for those.
All right. Thank you. Chairman Zachary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Gentlemen, good morning. A quick question related to the Teacher Scholars Program. There's a reduction of just over $600,000 within the budget. Can you describe how that'll impact the program, please?
That is a program that was ended 2 years ago. So those the students who are currently in that program will be phased out, and there are no additional students coming into that program.
Very good. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And you mentioned this, Dr. Smith, in your overview just kind of quickly, but if you could, for the benefit of, we have new members on our committee, we have folks watching at home who might not really understand this process. So can you just give, or someone on your staff, give us an overview of how the work that you all do at the commission in determining capital projects, for the governor's budget list of consideration. Can you just give us an idea of how that process works, how long, what information you get from the universities and kind of the, if you will, the man hours and the resources that are involved in putting that together.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair. This is Lou Hanneman with the Higher Education Commission. So the process for that usually begins in the early spring when we send out the instructions to the campuses. And if you'll recall, back in 2016, with the Focus Act, we changed that capital outlay process. Historically, there used to be the two lists, one from the Tennessee Board of Regents system and one from the UT system, and THEC then merged those lists into, I guess, mostly based on parity between the two systems. And then once you got on the list, your project just moved up as projects were funded. With the passage of the Focus Act, we converted that process to a more competitive process. We were focused on the Drive to 55. We were focused on very intentional capital outlay projects. And so that is now essentially a competitive grant process that starts over every year. Institutions submit their projects to us at the commission. We have several readers for that process. We have a scored rubric that the institutions are made aware of on the front end. And through that process, we basically get the campuses to focus in on the impact of the project to the Drive to 55, proper space usage in accordance with the state guidelines that are proffered not only by THEC but also by the State Building Commission. Does that project align with the campus master plans that are approved by the commission? Does it fit in with their strategic plan, their academic forecasting for new programs? Basically, all of those. Are we building buildings that the campuses will use for the long term for student benefit, or are we just kind of putting new buildings up around the campus? Once that process is complete and we have a scored list of projects, those are submitted to the commission without editing for their consideration as a recommendation. Once the commission votes on that, usually at the November commission meeting, that list is then forwarded on to the commissioner of F&A. At that point, for all intents and purposes, the commission's fingerprints on that process are done. The commissioner and the governor have the latitude to take that list of prioritized projects and fund those that they wish and those that they don't. Then that process comes over in the form of the budget, to which the General Assembly then has the next bite at that particular apple to either add projects, change projects, and so forth. Our philosophy, really since this process was changed, if the project was sufficient and vetted well enough to make that list, it is a fundable and legitimate project for consideration.
But if I understood you correctly, now I want to be certain because that was a change, like historically prior to the Focus Act, if you got on the list, then you just stayed on the list and moved up. But under our new process, every year is a new competitive grant, if you will. And so there may be new projects that would leapfrog someone else that was on the list previously. So being on the list doesn't guarantee funding even down the road, correct?
Yes, ma'am, that's absolutely correct. In fact, one thing that does change from time to time are focus areas for, capital outlay lists. Last year, you'll recall, we had two lists, one that was predominantly renovations, and then we had a second list of capital projects primarily focused on STEM and workforce-aligned type projects. And so we don't always peg the capital outlay list to a certain theme like that, but that too would also influence whether or not a project was carried forward again. But campuses always have the prerogative to resubmit the same project, and more often than not do after having taken the project back, cleaned it up, and worked on it some more. They usually come back better projects.
All right, and one other question, then I'll let other people who are on my list. But when we're talking about these projects, and maybe you're not the right person to direct the question to, since you've stated that once the projects are to the governor's office and to the budget, then your THEC's influence and I guess your charge of those projects is pretty much done. But we have funded a number of capital projects in the past 2 years. Those, we all know that those don't get done overnight, and we all know the inflationary factors, and I think you mentioned, Dr. Smith, in your presentation. So do we have any kind of idea at this point what the cost overruns are on projects that are already in the pipeline, what that funding requirement is just to continue the projects that we've committed to and to be able to fund them with the inflationary prices that we're looking at?
Yes, ma'am. In fact, that's a brilliant question because it's really one of the issues that we're facing around higher education capital outlay that may kind of take over the conversation in a lot of ways. 2 projects on our list this year were actually not new projects. They were requests for additional funding to account for inflation for 2 projects that came through our 21-22 capital outlay list, one for MTSU and one for Austin Peay. In lieu of submitting a new building request, they submitted those requests. What we are going to be facing likely with if you'll recall last year, we funded a substantial capital outlay for higher education, some 30-plus projects, almost $2 billion worth of buildings. Our early estimates, and we're working on a document right now that will lay out kind of a calculation for coming up with what is the projected number. Most of these projects were started back in January of 21 and then kind of moved through the process. And so we have a time frame that we can apply a general inflationary number to in order to get a base number. But the longer those projects take to come to fruition, the more that compounding impact of inflation will be. So we're working on a memo. We'll get that to you as soon as we possibly can. That will kind of lay that out, not just for capital outlay, but also for deferred maintenance, which is also doesn't suffer quite the same factors, but very similar.
So members, I think it's just important for us to remember as we're looking at this budget, not only are we looking at what is required to fund new projects and new programs that we might put in place, but we are going to have to go back and put a significant amount of money in the budget to cover just increased cost. So I've stated here before, $1 billion just doesn't go as far as it used to. And I think that's something that we are just going to have to be mindful of as we move through this budget process. We are going to have to make sure that we have funding allocated to cover the projects that were that have already been, we've already said, yes, we're going to do this, but to do that, it's going to cost the state a significant amount of money, and we're going to have to account for that in our budgeting process. And I apologize for hogging the mic today. Chairman Hicks, it's your turn.
Thank you, Chair Lady and Director. Thank you for being here. There you are. Thank you for being here. I just got a couple of questions regarding the, I guess, ease of systems, if you will, for prospective students. What is the commission doing to make sure that, because all the many great and wonderful things that you all have done and the institutions have done, but what is the commission doing to make sure that students know about what programs are available, what degrees and certificates are available? Can you talk and speak about that process?
Yeah, because that is the real challenge going forward. In a way, we've begun to address the affordability issue. Now the overall access issue becomes the most serious part of this. And a number of our programs are basically one-to-one to resolve those kinds of issues. And Dr. Stephen Gentile will speak to the nature of those programs.
Especially, sir, Stephen Gentile, Chief Policy Officer, especially, sir, with declining college-going enrollment rates going down 9 percentage points. It is the primary focus of our agency right now. There are a number of things in the budget itself that we were giving non-recurring dollars for our Navigate Reconnect program, which are advisors across the state of Tennessee to help adults make connections from, gee, I'd like to go back to college, to actually enrolling back into college, into our community colleges, and taking advantage of our Reconnect. We are grateful for that infusion of funds in this year's budget. We have 2 summer bridge programs that are being funded in this budget on a non-recurring basis for our HBCUs, which is what we used back in 2019, the summer of 2019, under our Director of HBCU Success, with 5 undergraduate serving institutions in Tennessee, providing onboarding opportunities for those students. And as well, a Tennessee Promise Summer Bridge program is in this funding as well. So those are the actual programmatic influences that we have. We are also trying to utilize all the resources that we have. We have the best data in the state of Tennessee for higher education and can connect it with our labor and Department of Education and making those seamless connections to the point of about a year ago, we launched on College for TN this body pass and the Students' Right to Know bill, which provides detailed information and success rates and opportunities and academic programs and workforce outcomes for all of our institutions. However, like I said, that college going rate has declined. And as Dr. Bob Smith mentioned, the momentum year is what is guiding us right now. How are we utilizing all resources? Advise TN is the primary one that I want to focus on right now. Advise TN is an ongoing program that we have. 30 advisors across the state of Tennessee in underserved high schools, across 28 high schools, serving 14,000 students per year, helping them connect to the college experience. Before I came to work in policy, I worked as an admission counselor, and I got to go to a variety of high schools across this country, across Tennessee. And there was a notable change in college-going culture between high schools that had guidance offices that were helping students navigate the real-world demands in that high school, and high schools that had guidance offices and also college advising services. Those students were getting double treatment. They were having the guidance to navigate through high school and those demands, and then having one person who was specifically helping that student connect and apply to college. We have a request in this budget for $925,000 that would help sustain that operation that we have and also increase from 30 to 34 counselors across the state of Tennessee. And that is something that did not make through the proposed governor's budget, but that Dr. Bob Smith has mentioned already.
Here's the bottom line. Where we are, we can prove we've made a difference. The problem is scalability. Just being everywhere we need to be.
Madam Chair.
Chairman Hicks.
And kind of continuing in this vein, what about financial aid? Tell me about that process. What's that look like? Is that a complicated? And I remember it's been a while since I've dealt with financial aid. But tell me about that process, especially for our students and that experience that students are going to experience as they go through that process.
Yes, sir. We have, first of all, the reality is the free application for federal student aid, which Tennessee is a leader in submission across the country, the free application for federal student aid is complex. It has gotten simple over the years, led by Senator Lamar Alexander's time in the Senate to simplify that FAFSA. I could say, though, also as a former financial aid counselor, I struggle in completing the FAFSA when I've had to do it recently. It is a challenge, and we have a lot of dedicated staff. In addition to Advise TN, we have the arm of our Tennessee Student Assistant Corporation, outreach counselors who will go from high school to high school. I was talking to one just yesterday telling me how grateful he is Jason C., that he can get back into the high schools and help students navigate that process. So we can't control what's on the FAFSA, but we can control how we help our students navigate it. So simplifying that process, but also aligning our financial aid to make it more obvious that students will have financial aid opportunities. Tennessee Promise was that. Tennessee Promise will assure that students will have tuition-free community college, TCAT, some university associate degree program education. But that message of you will have that free education. You've got to, yes, you have some FAFSA applications to submit, but the message is there. If you get through that, you will have it. So it is on our team, the state, and personnel to help simplify that process, and that's what we do day in, day out.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Next on the list, Chairman Boyd.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady, and appreciate you guys coming today. Quick question: Are there any programs that y'all have identified as being underperforming, and are there any programs that seem to have a better return on investment? Can you elaborate on those?
Well, I think that over the past, Lou Hanneman, sorry, Higher Education Commission, I think in terms of underperforming, do you mean within the agency specifically?
I'm talking about, yes, yeah.
Okay. I think that we have largely trimmed those out. A lot of times what we'll do is we will run in partnership with our partnering organizations and other stakeholders, various pilot programs, startups, incubator, if you will, and then in some cases move those off to other stakeholders to manage if they're successful. I think to Dr. Gentile's point just a moment ago, a couple of the real gems that we've seen that have really turned the tide, Dr. Smith mentioned this college going rate momentum year. Well, that momentum year is predicated on that enrollment decline. Well, if you were to look at a heat map across the state of some of the brighter spots, you'd find there the Advise TN advisors. You would find our partners in the AIRS Foundation. You'd find our partners in Tennessee Achieves and others, and working, in kind of concert. We really tend to focus on those programs that are successful. I think underperforming programs make themselves apparent pretty quickly, and we don't move them forward. I would say most of those have probably come through our GIVE grants, which has been a real test bed for best practices and good ideas. But because of the 2 to 3 year run on those, we've been allowed to cull out those that are really successful and phase out those that aren't.
Chairman Williams.
Thank you, Director. Thank you all for coming. I just had a couple quick questions. You talked about the decline on that slide just before this one. You talked about the overall decline. I'm a little lost here. So if you could just communicate to me, this reduction that you see, this 9% reduction over 2 years, is a reduction in those who are re-enrolling after being enrolled, or those who are graduating and not enrolling as a percentage of the graduating population?
Yes, sir. Every year we calculate the college going rate of our high school seniors in public institutions. That's the data that we're able to collect. And we're able to track if they're going to our TCATs, community colleges, universities, public and private, and across the country, utilizing National Student Clearinghouse. And so we look at the percentage that had a diploma, high school diploma, how many enrolled either that summer or that fall. We had a great increase in that number coming out of Tennessee Promise, getting all the way up to 63.8% of our high school seniors. A little decline before the pandemic, and then it plummeted throughout the pandemic, down 9 percentage points, which equals roughly about 7,000 fewer students going to college directly out of high school per year.
Chairman Williams.
Thank you. Do you look at the data as it relates to, when I went to college several years ago, the idea of college was that we wanted everyone to go, right? And I grew up in a working class family, and this was a way out for me to find a better life for myself. Still ended up doing what my dad does, so it really doesn't matter. But the fact of the matter is that the promises that we are making, we have seen a real change. Like, for instance, in the profession that I'm in construction services, you don't have to have a college degree, and I'm paying twice today what I was paying somebody to operate a backhoe. I guess the question is when I look at that percentage rate, I don't necessarily see a negative, I guess. Is there any data to back up whether that's actually a negative or not? Or are you following these students out to see what they're actually doing after graduation, or no?
Yes, sir. We are. I'll address a couple of those points real quick. First of all, we have an upcoming college going rate report that will come out in about May, where we're tracking the last year's high school graduating class. An improvement on that report from last year is that we're going to be looking at, well, if they're not going into college, where are they going? Mm-hmm. And we can look at past classes to see that. Because the hunch we have is that they're going into the workforce. Mm-hmm. It's a good jobs economy right now. You can get a job. We always talk about at Buc-ee's for $20 an hour, mm-hmm. Which is well above the minimum wage. However, to the point that Director Smith mentioned, a college education is something that is not taken away from you. We want all of our students, our high school students and adult students, to have the opportunity to go to college if that's what they want. Mm-hmm. What the research does show is that students who don't immediately enroll coming out of high school are less likely to enroll later on in life, even if they want a college education. Mm-hmm. So our concern is, while we have a good jobs economy right now, we won't forever. And so those students who are getting those good jobs, what is their what's going to happen to them when they lose those good jobs? Ideally, they'd have a college education to fall back on, or we can work with our Navigate Reconnect team to get those students seamlessly back enrolled.
Understand that, from the way we see it, it is really, really critical that people have post-secondary skills. And when we talk about college, I think it's too often easy to say, well, then you must be talking about the baccalaureate. But when we're talking about it, that includes the TCATs as well as the community colleges. And given the skills that are necessary for manufacturing now, high school education just isn't going to get it. And so we've got to be able to provide for the long-term education and continued education of folks in post-secondary opportunities.
I agree with, my apologies. I agree with what you're saying. There's nothing like having correct training, but as some of us might say, OJT is pretty good too. And so I think it really depends on how you're following the child out. I did have a couple quick questions, and I don't want to monopolize the time, and I already feel the chair lady looking at me. So one of the things that I remember THEC, one of the responsibilities that I remember THEC having when I first got elected here was that they helped all of our state institutions across the state govern or manage what deliveries or degree delivery they were doing in order to make sure that there wasn't an overlap of services or we were providing too much. And so as we made an investment into a certain sector, that we weren't, hurting our other institutions. My question is, when was the last time that we denied someone an expansion of services in their actual institution across the state?
So the last time that a substantive request to onboard a new program and that was denied was the prospect of a law school at the Middle Tennessee State University a couple of years ago. And mind you, that was a pretty substantial change, and there were a number of factors that went into that decision. That was a decision. That was a request that was brought directly to our commission, and in lieu of other pathways. But that was the decision that was made. I think that decisions are being made on an ongoing basis down to the granular level about new academic programs and overduplication. Do we have service area conflicts? Those decisions come up when we consider site selection for new facilities and things of that nature, taking into account not just sector, but also, the downstream implications for employability and so forth.
Right. Well, the reason for the question is that when I look at the work that THEC's doing, and this is not a slight on y'all whatsoever, it just seems like you're building a list, we're not following the list. You know what I'm saying? You're in only one instance in the last 12 years do I recognize that we've actually denied something and it was brought to you individually. It used to be that we could look at these different things. I guess when I look at it, it just seems like that we're either not adhering to the policies and what we set forth with THEC, and maybe we need to reevaluate what it is that we're actually doing, because other than if we're ignoring the list as it relates to capital projects, and we're not denying folks to do that and allowing business, our LGIs and other institutions across the state to be able to operate their own capital like a business, it just seems like there's not a whole lot left, and particularly if we're funding the Complete College Act, fully funding it every year based upon outcomes-based formulas. So I guess my argument would be is why do we still need to do THEC? Sell me on why we still need to be doing this.
Are you speaking directly about the capital outlay list? I would just say this. The purpose of that list is to take projects in from the institutions, and we vet them not just for architectural soundness, not just for their fiscal plan, the business model, not just for the degree to which that program will actually fit in with the mission of the state, which I think largely gets left behind here. The institutions, I get that they're all out there trying to do right by their own sense of themselves, but it's all part of one higher education enterprise. And there's one higher education mission for this state, and that is the pursuit of additional credentials for our Tennesseans so that forever they have that walking paper that Dr. Smith talked about. I think that's the value of that list, so that the General Assembly, when looking at the priorities of the state, can know that they have a list in front of them of projects that are scored in terms of the value they bring and the value of the project and the readiness of those projects, so that then you can make decisions. You're right. There have been times in the past where the list is jumped around on, and I think that those decisions are, there's many factors that go into that decision-making, but you always have a starting point of prioritized value.
And Chairman Hawk, I know you have a question. We are way behind. I've not done a good job of managing this. So if you would help me out with a brevity of question and brevity of answer, then we will move on and try to give our other presenters ample time.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I will be brief. The lottery games, the funding from lottery games are constitutionally bound to higher ed. The sports wagering dollars, not so much. I see we've got endowment funds that are growing and growing and growing that are funding some of these scholarships. Are we at a point now with those endowments where we, as a legislature, can better invest or choose to invest those sports wagering dollars somewhere else? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Hawk. This is a really important question. In 2013, when we put the promise on the street, the goal was sustainability. That the Tennesseans would have this opportunity in perpetuity moving forward. It is accurate to say that the earnings off of that account are, if only just barely, covering one-to-one the cost of the program. There is no margin for error, and last year we did suffer a loss to that corpus, to the body, due to the markets, and year-to-date we're also down. And so, there is no cushion. And so the gaming monies, while they're not constitutionally bound, they are statutorily directed to that account for a reason, because every single dollar brought in on those revenues is actively earning a dollar to pay on a scholarship. There are no funds within the lottery portfolio or the promise accounts that are just standing static. Every dollar is earning a dollar for a scholarship that goes out the door.
And thank you to our friends from TEC. We're sorry to keep you on the hot seat for an extended period of time. We're going to ask, and Representative Miller, I saw your hand, but if you would just, we are way over time. If you would provide your question to me, then we will get it to TEC and get an answer for the good of the committee. We're going to ask our LGIs to come forward next. Welcome. And I know that you're here, Dr. Adam, representing the LGIs and also your institution of Tennessee Tech, but we want to claim you from Chattanooga because we trained you up there. So I'm glad that we did a good job so that you could do a good job for the folks at Tennessee Tech and for my colleague here on the panel who now claims you. But welcome, and we're just going to ask you, because I have allowed us to get way behind, to be as quickly through your presentation as you can, and then we will try to just dig down with our questions and see if we can, without shortchanging you or the institutions you represent.
Sure. Thank you, Chair Lady Hazelwood. It's a pleasure to be with you today. It's an honor for me to represent the LGIs, the locally governed institutions, the 6 of us here today. And I'll just note that the other presidents are sitting behind me if there's any specific questions for any institution. So we have Bill Hartgrave from Memphis and Glenda Glover from Tennessee State, Mike Licari from Austin Peay, Sidney McPhee from Middle Tennessee State, and Brian Nolan from East Tennessee State. as I said, I'm proud to represent today the 83,000 plus students at the LGIs and over 10,000 employees. So we have a lot going on these institutions. I will just sort of tie back to a previous discussion, and I have a unique position in that in the last 16 years since I came back to my home state, I've had the opportunity to work both in the University of Tennessee system and in the Tennessee Board of Regents and now with the LGIs. And over that time period, it's been a remarkable experience to see Tennessee really emerge in higher education nationally. And the things that you see now on our campuses is radically different than what it was those few short years ago. Over the last decade and a half, it's really changed the culture, and it's due largely to the leadership not only from multiple governors, but also this General Assembly and previous General Assemblies that have prioritized higher education and investment in higher ed, whether it's the Complete College Tennessee Act 2010 through Tennessee Promise and the Focus Act and on and on. It's changed the culture to being very student-centered, and that was not the case a decade and a half ago. And so I give all of you and your predecessors a lot of credit. So one thing real quick, and this is maybe a slightly different personal perspective that you will not be as familiar with. Public universities are a unique business, and a lot of my colleagues would probably take issue with me calling it a business, but I believe it is. Certainly our students and families believe it's a business because they pay a fee and we provide a service. And so in that sense, it is a business. It is state-owned and operated, obviously, which makes it a little bit unique. We're nonprofit, but we're required and expected to be fiscally well-managed, and we make every attempt to be so. But I think what really makes us unique is it's the only business I know of where the customer and the product are the same thing, and that's the student. The student comes in, obviously, as a customer, departs the institution as the product, and ultimately then provides value to their communities and the state as a whole. So, I mean, we do produce the talent that drives the future of the state of Tennessee, and I think it's really important to keep in mind. As all of us at times talk to business people and other enterprises that are looking to move into Tennessee, talent is always the biggest issue. Do you have the talent, and where are they going to get the talent? And I'm proud to say that we were able to produce that. So I want to thank you, the General Assembly, for the support that you have provided and continue to provide for that future. Of course, the LGIs are spread out across the entire state of Tennessee, from the mountains in East Tennessee to the Mississippi River. And so in that standpoint, we do touch all the corners of the state. As I indicated, the total impact of the LGIs, we have over 83,000 total students currently. We're producing more than 20,000 graduates annually. The estimated, we don't all have up-to-date economic impact statements, but estimated more than $8 billion annually of total economic impact to the state of Tennessee. And so just a simple algorithm will tell you that's about a 10-to-1 return on investment of Tennessee state tax dollars that are invested. I think it's also important to mention that 5 of the 6 LGI institutions are also nationally ranked research universities and accounting for over $150 million annually in research expenditures. And so we certainly produce a lot of graduates, and a lot of talent comes out of our institutions, but that is also driven by research, funded research, competitive research, that goes into very practical, applied things that impact the daily lives of Tennesseans, things like rural health and telemedicine, cybersecurity, roads and bridges, electric vehicles, and the list is pretty lengthy. So a lot of impact value from these institutions, even beyond the graduates that we produce. Specifically to the budget, let me just highlight that that we really do appreciate the support that we've been provided in recent years, and we've been able to do really good things with that. And so obviously our aim, our goal is to try to do more of that. We want to produce more value for the state of Tennessee. There is a gap between the THEC recommendation on operating as opposed to the governor's proposed budget. For the LGIs, that represents, you look in the bottom right corner here, that represents about $14.5 million gap between the governor's proposed budget and the THEC recommendation for funding on the formula. In terms of capital, we've already been talking some about the capital list this morning, and not to go back over all of that, but as you can see, the governor's proposed budget does not fund any of the new capital outlay projects for the LGIs. If I go to the next slide, you'll see the total list of THEC original capital recommendations. 3 of the top 4 new capital outlay projects were LGI projects, and accounting for, let me go back, I don't remember the exact number, about $160 million, I think, in those 3 projects alone. So, to sort of summarize here, the LGI request for consideration of the General Assembly, and I would preface all of these categories as predictability. Predictability is a very important concept for all the universities. The better we can project out in terms of funding levels, particularly over multiple years, it gives us much more capability of managing successfully and keeping costs reduced for students, which is a high priority on all of our campuses. So predictability is really important. So the THEC recommendation for LGIs on operating was $58.9 million. And this is important in terms of predictability because it rewards outcomes and provides a lot of that important predictability. The pressures that we're under now, inflation has already been mentioned a number of times. Certainly we're dealing with that on multiple levels. The salary pool is extremely welcome, but it's always noted that the state portion funds 60% of that salary pool, so that puts the burden of the other 40% on the institutions to find those funds elsewhere, and puts increased pressure on potential tuition increases, which we don't want to do. There's also baked into this, there's a lot of unfunded mandates that have grown up over the years. That totals to just short of $16 million annually for the LGIs. These are a range of tuition discounts for teachers, state employees, veterans, et cetera, et cetera. So it adds up quite a bit. Capital outlay, again, predictability, and in terms of predictability here, it's primarily working with donors. There's matching components associated with capital projects, and it's very difficult as presidents to go out and meet with donors on a regular basis and say, hey, we'd like for you to help us with this capital project, and not be able to give them some sense of timing on when that could occur or if it would ever happen at all. And so predictability is very important in terms of working on these projects. So the THEC recommendation for those 3 of the top 4 LGI projects total to about $167 million. And then lastly, capital maintenance. This is an ongoing concern of all of our campuses. In order to simply tread water, if you will, to keep pace with current decline of our infrastructure, requires about $90 million a year in capital maintenance on the LGI campuses to just keep up. And the governor's proposed budget currently recommends about $30 million for that. In order to catch up over a 10-year period, we would need about $140 million a year to catch up with the current level of deferred maintenance. So with that, I'll stop. I'll certainly be glad to address any questions, or my colleagues can, and we certainly have a lot of chief financial officers with us as well, if there's any other questions.
Well, thank you, Dr. Odom, and thank you for all of your colleagues from the various universities. As you say, they go from Mountain City to Memphis, as we find the saying, almost Mountain City, with East Tennessee State University to the University of Memphis. But we do appreciate your presentation. Have questions on the list, beginning with Leader Cochran. Oh. Representative Moon, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. The funding gap that you just spoke of, are tuition and fee increases being considered for fiscal year 23-24, and if so, at what level for the LGIs?
The working guidance that we've received from THEC this fall was 0 to 3% as a tuition increase range. That's provided from THEC early in the cycle so that we can just have some planning room to work through some of those issues. I think the default position that all of us take is to keep tuition low and to keep it as low as possible. Certainly all of our campuses with the inflationary pressures and other factors that come into play, it's always on the table, but it's not our first resort by any means.
Madam Chair Lady, one more quick question.
Certainly, Chairman Moon.
As a grandparent, are there additional security needs at the campuses that you feel like are not currently funded?
Yes, sir. I appreciate you bringing that up. There was a request that came forward from THEC regarding safety and security measures on campuses to support that. I don't believe it was supported in the governor's proposed budget. That is an ongoing issue on all of our campuses as well, and I know that it's a extremely high priority for all of us. And just even the recent media attention to our north says that that's incredibly important, and we don't need to slide it.
Thank you, Chairman Moon. Chairman Hicks.
Thank you, Chair Lady, and good to see you here this morning. Thank you. Just, I guess, can you talk about the ERP system that last year, let's say $170 million non-recurring was appropriated for the enterprise resource planning system? Can you just talk a little bit about, for those who may really need a little better understanding of exactly what that does, and then talk about implementation, how the LGIs are going to implement this, and kind of where we're at?
Sure, and I've got plenty of people behind me that can help fill in details as we need to. ERP is for any of us that don't deal in this world to a large extent, your eyes begin to glaze over probably a little bit. But this is a highly data-driven enterprise that we have in higher education. Whether you're talking about student records or financial accounts or whatever, it's heavily data driven, and be able to maintain data in a safe, secure fashion, and accuracy is premier. So these systems are expensive. There's not a lot of vendors that do this work on university campuses, University of Tennessee kind of led this effort over the last couple of years in the sense of bringing us all together in a sort of joint effort, because all of our campuses needed updating on ERP systems. And so it's a massive expense. I think it was appropriate that the state took this on as a capital expenditure, because that's really what it is. It is software, it is hardware, but it's a lot of personnel as well to help drive this. And so when you replace an ERP system on a campus, that's a multi-year process that you're going through. Right now, most of us are at various stages of implementing the business, financial, human resources components of the ERP. Following that, most of us will then turn to the student data portion of the ERP, which is really a separate project in and of itself. But these are long-term projects. You really have to think well in advance, not only in implementation of the project, but but think in terms of maybe 2 decades or longer of actually using that particular ERP system. So it's a major investment, not only of resources but time and energy, and so I'm pretty proud of how the campus seem to be addressing this currently. It's a big project for all of us.
And Madam Chair, and do you know, have any of the funds that I mentioned, have they been drawn down from any of the LGIs, UT?
I'm not positive about all the LGIs. I think some of the funds have been drawn down, but I couldn't tell you. I mean, we can get you that information.
Okay.
But I couldn't tell you right now off the top of my head how much has been.
And then-
They're at various stages of implementation, so.
Okay. And then the other question from the previous group that came up and spoke, one of the questions, of course, that I asked was talking about the ease of systems for students. So I guess what are LGIs doing? Well, I asked higher ed, what are they doing, the commission, but what are LGIs doing to make sure that students know what is being offered, what the degrees, certificates are out there? How are you guys making sure that you're getting to those prospective students? And as well as that, talk a little bit about financial aid. What is that looking like, at your all's level? Because that's really where the rubber meets the road. So if you can speak on that.
So this is really the heart of it. When you talk to prospective students, and particularly families, the amount of information overload that they get is overwhelming. And so we all go to great lengths, and I can certainly speak on behalf of my institution, what we do in particular, but we go to great lengths to eliminate as much of that uncertainty as possible, as early as possible. So provide a degree of certainty in terms of the amount of financial assistance available. And it is complicated because not only do you have institutional aid that might be available, but you have the federal financial aid that has its own set of requirements and timelines and all associated with it. So there's a lot there to unpack, but helping families understand that as early as possible is very helpful, and actually providing staff that can help walk them through that as needed. The human touch is really important in this regard, and so I think all of us provide that in a variety of ways. But ultimately, then, it's the return on their investment to ensure that the degrees that they're going to earn lead to career opportunities that they're aspiring for, and that they understand what those opportunities are. And so counseling and advising services become highly important throughout the whole process.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Chairman Baum.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, President Oldham. We've heard a lot about $1 billion new dollars in proposed spending for TCAT centers, but I think everybody on this committee understands that that's funding for TCAT centers and not for LGIs and UT. You've told us a moment ago that there's no funding for new capital projects in the governor's proposed budget, and it includes about $30 million in maintenance out of about $90 million that's been requested. And so what I'd like to do is give you an opportunity, maybe this is another opportunity, to tell this committee about your capital maintenance needs for LGIs and UT.
Sure. As I indicated, the amount of deferred maintenance on all of our campuses is pretty well documented. Most all of us have gone through extensive surveys of the needs on our campus with external professionals coming in to review the status of our facilities. And the current estimates are that $90 million a year for the 6 LGIs is needed to just keep us at current levels of deferred maintenance. So as you can imagine, it's like maintaining your home. As soon as you fix something else breaks, and you need to go take care of that. And so on campuses this size, you have the same issues. And so to keep up with the current level of deferred maintenance is about $90 million a year. To catch up over a 10-year period would require $140 million a year in capital maintenance expenditures to get there. Now, most of our campuses, we certainly do. We scratch and claw for every extra dollar we can find to meet that level. On our campus at Tennessee Tech, our number is about $10 million a year we need to spend in terms of capital maintenance. And we try to get there however possible. So if we have any leftover dollars in the annual budget, we try to put it toward capital maintenance and keep that under control to the extent possible. And I'm sure all the other campuses do the same thing. So that's where the need is.
Okay, thank you. And next, I want to ask a little bit about inflation. Everybody in the room has experienced the effects of inflation. When a capital project is approved and it's funded by the state, and then there's a lag before it's completed, prices go up. Some of this may be due to disruptions in the supply chain. How do LGIs and UT respond when price inflation results in a project that's been funded costing a lot more by the time of completion?
So it varies by campus, I think, and it varies by project. It's a very important question, and we deal with it all the time. When you're going through, projects, capital projects go through sort of a roller coaster ride, and there's a constant tension between managing the cost of the project with the scope and expectations of the final product. And so there's adjustments that get made throughout that design process and sometimes even into the construction phase. Generally speaking, with reasonable levels of inflation, you can accommodate that through some modest changes in scope or some design, improved engineering through the process to gain some efficiencies. With the kind of inflation we're dealing with right now, it's very problematic. It typically is outstripping our abilities to manage those types of normal inflationary cost increases.
Okay, and one more question,
Chairman
Madam
Baum,
Chair.
go ahead.
Thank you. Last question. So when a project does go over budget due to inflation, who bears that cost? Who makes up that difference?
Again, I think that can vary quite a bit. In probably most cases so far, the institutions eat the cost in some form or fashion. Generally speaking, capital projects are not borne by the students. It's in some cases with disclosed projects, they might be depending on the funding source, but for the most part, it's taken out of other institutional priorities, and that's the way we manage it.
Okay, thank you.
Chairman Williams.
Thank you, Dr. Oldham. Pleasure to see you.
Good to see you.
Hails from the 42nd District, so welcome. Glad to see you and your team up here today. I did want to ask you one other question to follow up on what Chairman Baum was saying about the THEC list. I know that prior to your excellent service at Tech that you were at UTC, but I guess the question is, or do you ever remember where the legislature has funded a phase one of a project but not the back half and skipped 2 years? It looks as if on the THEC project that we have funded maybe half of a facility at your local LGI at ETSU. Mm-hmm. Do you ever remember us doing that? And if that were to happen to you at Tech, what would that mean? Do you just stop the project, or how does that work?
No, generally speaking, that's extremely problematic, and I could certainly let Dr. Nolan speak for that particular project. But yeah, if the it really depends on how the project is structured. If it is a project that's designed to be in sort of rapid order, then yeah, that's very difficult, and you would expect not only the time delay, so the opportunity costs associated with that delay, but also likely significant inflationary cost increases in completing that project. So it's it's not the best way of doing things by any means.
Okay. Just as a follow-up, I think it's interesting, it's telling there, because I know that what we want to do is we want to follow the list whenever possible. But in this instance, I think it's important for the members, at least of this committee, to know that we're talking today about inflationary pressures, and sometimes we create them. And this is an instance in which we would create cost overruns and inflationary pressures, and I think it's something that we definitely should look at, and particularly with this one project, because of the nature of it already being in the pipeline. Final question. State Building Commission, what are your thoughts for LGIs or tech in particularly about the idea of those projects being funded through your own private capital contributions through the likes of the Oakley family or something like that, or issuing bonds on your own? Do you think it's necessary, or does for those projects to go through the State Building Commission for review and approval? Do you think it would help the process and speed it up, and therefore maybe relieve some of these cost overruns and inflationary pressures?
Well, I certainly respect the work that the Building Commission does and the process and the interest of the state in all of these projects. I think there probably are some ways that could be explored that could open this up a little bit more for the universities to proceed with a little more expediency and still protect the state interests in the long run, which are obviously very important. So I would certainly support any kind of exploration that would provide that opportunity. I know our competitive institutions outside the state of Tennessee are often able to move much more rapidly than we can on capital projects, which gives them a significant competitive advantage over us. Yeah.
Thank you. Do you have any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Dr. Odom, for representing your university and the other six. And I would be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity. One of your number, Tennessee State, pretty unprecedented achievement. I'm just astounded that Representative Love didn't take the opportunity to comment on that, but on his behalf, I will. But we certainly want to recognize and congratulate Tennessee State on their Grammy-winning award. Representative Love, I did call your name.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And if I can add an addendum to your congratulations, I want to congratulate them on their 2 Grammy Awards that they have won, and also for representing the state wonderfully last year in the Rose Bowl parade. So again, thank Tennessee State for their wonderful work. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And again, I can't believe that there wasn't mention of former member of that Grammy-winning institution. We're going to ask the University of Tennessee, President Boyd.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, Chair Lady. I'm hopeful if I can keep it under 5 minutes, Chairman Faison will give me one of those donuts that he was talking about earlier. So that's my goal, and I'll leave a lot of the time.
Everybody needs a worthy goal.
That's a good one. I want to focus on a few highlights from the University of Tennessee, talk about some of the things you guys have been asking, but save most of the budgetary questions specifically for each of you. First off, thank you. The University of Tennessee and all of the universities and colleges in the state of Tennessee are blessed to have the state of Tennessee, the governor, and your support. We visit with colleges and universities all across the country, and no one's more fortunate than the state of Tennessee to have the kind of support that we get. So we just are incredibly thankful for that support. At the University of Tennessee, we are one of the land-grant universities in the state of Tennessee, and our mission is to serve the people of Tennessee. Because of your support, we're able to do that. One of the main things we focus on as the University of Tennessee, as Dr. Oldham had mentioned, was keeping students first. We have a laser focus on our students, and one of the things we do to help serve our students is making sure access to our university is affordable. About 4 years ago, we introduced something called the UT Promise that said that if your family income was under $50,000, you could come to any one of our universities free of tuition and fees. Last year, we upgraded that to $60,000. So now more than half the population in the state of Tennessee can come to our university free of tuition and fees. I know there's a lot of questions about financial aid. It's free. So we've got counselors that will help you, but it makes it really easy. They're not having to worry about doing a lot of the math or calculations. We make it very simple for them. We're also focused on making sure that we keep our prices in line and so that we're affordable. So this is a trivia question for you, and you can text me the answer because we don't have time today. But the question is, over the last 4 years, how many things can you think of that have had no cost increase over the last 4 years? So you can think about it. Think what over the last 4 years has not had a single price increase. The University of Tennessee's Health Science Center has not increased the tuition and fees for 4 years. UT Knoxville has not increased tuition and fees for 4 years. Across our system, of the last 4 years, 2 of the 4 years, none of our campuses increased tuition and fees. So we're working hard to keep our costs down. As a result, our students are graduating with very low debt. Last year, 47% of our students graduated with zero debt. The national narrative is that everybody goes to college and it's so expensive and they graduate with all this debt. Not at the University of Tennessee. 47% graduate with zero debt. And it's going to get better because that stat didn't include UT Promise, which was just introduced 4 years ago, and it doesn't include the increase in Tennessee Promise that you passed last year. So you put those two things together, we can forecast that even more of our students are going to graduate with very low debt going forward in the future. The results of all that, we're having significant increases in our enrollment. Last year, we had a 4% increase in enrollment across the system. We also are increasing our retention rates. Across the system, we had record retention rates, and I'll highlight UT Southern. UT Southern had a 11.8% increase in retention. I know my friends in higher education behind me will know that that's a pretty astounding number. It's really hard to move retention, and to move it 11.8% in 1 year is phenomenal. A big part of that access is also geographic. There's a lot of people in southern Middle Tennessee that didn't have access to a public four-year higher education, and so by being able to bring Martin Methodist into the UT system and now relabel it as UT Southern, we have a whole part of our state that's now got access to a very affordable college education. In fact, the college tuition or the tuition rate at UT Southern went from $26,000 down to $10,000, and all those students are now eligible for the UT Promise. So we're trying to live up to the charge that you've given us to make sure that we can provide a high-quality college education at a very affordable price. We're also the partner for the state in a lot of different ways. As the land-grant university, we're here to serve the people of Tennessee. And something that we do on a regular basis is go to the different agencies, all 23, and say, how can we help? I'll give credit to Carrie Whitworth and her team and Josh Warren, who goes and visits each one of these agencies. I get to visit with them on occasion and ask them how we can help. And we've got a relationship with nearly everyone. I'll just highlight two partnerships I'm really proud of. One was with the Department of Education. Last year, they got a $20 million grant from the federal government asking us to ask for them to be able to create apprenticeships for teachers. So as we know, we have a teacher shortage. Over 2,000 teachers were charged with us to be able to, or we were asked to create 2,000 new apprenticeships through this grant. In turn, the Department of Education in turn asked us to partner with them. We've set this program up, and we're on our way to being able to produce 2,000 new apprentice teachers within the next 2 years. And an exciting note and another thank you to the governor. In his proposed budget, he's got another $5.1 million in there to be able to continue this program for many years in the future. I think I'm close to my 5 minutes. There's a lot of things I would like to say about the budget. I'll say, though, again, thank you to the governor. We're very appreciative of the 5% to the salary pool. That means a lot to all of our employees throughout the system. I will highlight, of course, what President Oldham also said is that funds, we estimate roughly 5 or 55% of what we need to actually fund it. When you add the performance funding formula less the amount that we had to fund for some of the salaries, it actually puts a couple of our campuses in the red. They actually are getting less as a result of doing that. But we're happy to be able to do it, to be able to support support our faculty and staff. With that, I'm going to conclude and turn it over to you for any questions about the budget or anything else you might have.
Thank you, President Boyd. Always good to hear you're enthusiastic and always brief but concise, or maybe that's a redundant term. But at any rate, we do appreciate it. I'm going to start off, and we have a number of questioners, but you talked a bit about what was in the budget. Can we talk a little bit about the things that weren't in there? I think the maintenance issue, maybe some capital projects and other things that the UT system proposed and requested that did not end up in the end product.
Yeah, so I'll first address some of the one thing that was less than what was requested regarding operating expenses. So as we know, and we've talked a lot about the funding formula, which is great for all of our undergraduate programs. If they meet certain graduation and retention criteria, there's an increase in funding for them. Unfortunately, if you have a graduate school program, like the Health Science Center, like the School of Public Health at ETSU, like our College of Veterinary Medicine, they're not part of that formula. So our funding is more episodic. In fact, over the last 10 years, the UT Health Science Center's increase has been 53% less per student than what our performance funding student formula campuses get and our students get. So we, on occasion, asked for a significant increase for them. Last year, or this year, THEC asked for a $13.1 million increase in operating funds for the UT Health Science Center. They've only got an increase once in the last 5 years. We needed a $13.1 million to help them continue to maintain the service that they provide. And as a reminder, the UT Health Science Center produces 70% of the dentists in the state and 40% of all the doctors in the state. If we're going to continue to support public health in our state, it's going to come through the Health Science Center. So we desperately need to support them. Well, rather than $13.1 million, we've got $1 million. So that's a pretty significant shortfall. So that's a challenge to us that we have to figure out how to overcome. With regards to capital maintenance, last year we had $45 million. This year we've got a commitment for, or a proposal for $30 million, so about a 50% decrease in capital maintenance to UT. And also, stat that's worth noting, we have $9 billion worth of assets, 1,200 buildings, and I think, again, as Dr. Oldham mentioned, the maintenance doesn't go down, it usually goes up. And so to maintain $9 billion worth of buildings, 1,200 buildings, we need to have sufficient funding to support capital maintenance. And I believe the total number, I believe my TIAC members or friends can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we're about $57 million short in what was requested for the capital maintenance. With regards to new capital, as we've talked about a lot, on the capital projects list, there's a ranking system. We had projects number 2, 5, and 6. Nothing on the ranking system got funded. And I think, just to make a side point, everything that we don't fund this year, next year is going to probably cost 10% more. And so just know that it's not going to get less expensive as we go forward. But on our list, our number two in the THEC list and number 1 on our list was a new business building at UT Chattanooga. The business building costs roughly $90 million. We have a donor that's willing to donate $30 million toward that building. So a pretty significant contribution from the private side to be able to fund this building. And he'll know now as a result of this testimony, but he didn't until that his project hasn't been funded. So it's going to be a challenge for us. You know, it's great when we get those kind of commitments, but donors kind of expect to have a match, and so that's going to be a challenge for us with that one. Business, and I don't need to probably belabor this, but business is a high demand degree. It's one of those degrees that we have more demand than we have capacity for. So this building will definitely be very important to us. The number 2, I'll be brief on the other 2. The second on our list, the 5th on the THEC list, was a new chemistry building. We've talked a lot about the TCATs being old. Our chemistry building is 70 years old. And I've toured it recently. The roof leaks. The lab equipment looks worse than anything you'd expect to see in a high school. And we produce or serve over 10,000 students through that building. So that was one that didn't get funded. And lastly, we're looking for a new gross anatomy lab at our UT Health Science Center to help them support the work that they do. Again, I want to say we appreciate everything that the governor recommended, and we're very thankful for it. And I also want to say that I'm a passionate supporter of the TCATs and happy for the funding that they've got. I visited all 27 TCATs, and they desperately need additional funding, so I don't mean to say anything negative about them, just sharing with you the challenges that we have.
Thank you. And just to kind of go a little further on that road with a little different perspective, Dr. Odom mentioned in his remarks the challenges that are faced by higher ed institutions in Tennessee versus in some of our neighboring states with some of these projects, and which leads to the length of some of these projects then leads to some of these cost overruns and inflationary factors that we've heard a little bit about here today. Can you give us, are there any ideas, are there states out there that have invented a wheel that works better that we might copy? Because it does seem we have a long time from, even if a project is funded, then that is just the beginning. That's the starting pistol for a very long race to the end when we can ribbon cut the project and put students in the building or whatever. So can you, first of all, kind of give us a kind of a timeline of how it works now, and then if you have any ideas or suggestions or places that we might go to look to model something that would work better? We'd be interested in hearing that.
Well, we break that into three parts. So the first part is with regards to studying other states. We have done that, and we've looked at the different processes. Every state's different, and there are certain things that are positive and certain things that are negative. But we're looking at different ways and we're actively studying what things that we might want to consider. Second, I guess the current process, it might take quite a while to actually go through. So maybe rather than do that, maybe talk about one thing that we've proposed, or that the Speaker and the Lieutenant Governor have proposed that we're fully supportive of, a new bill called the State Building Commission Modernization Act. And it'll do four things that will greatly speed up our ability to deliver products on time and on budget. Does four things. One, it'll help us to do small projects quicker and faster. The current threshold for capital maintenance projects needing approval from the State Building Commission is $250,000. Their bill suggests moving it up to $1 million. We're very supportive of that. A second clause in their bill is to say that if you've got donor funds or institutional funds to build an auxiliary building, a residence hall, or any athletic facility, any building that doesn't require state dollars to operate, then you can do it, the institution can build it themselves without going through the State Building Commission. So that will greatly speed up a vast majority of those type of projects. Two other things was mentioned, the disclosed projects list that sometimes can add up to a year through the process. In this bill, it's suggesting that when the institutions and their governor-appointed boards approve the disclosed projects, they go directly to the State Building Commission. That time is money, and that could save us close to a year. And similarly with the 5-year master plan, to be able to, once it's approved by the governor-appointed board, to be able to immediately submit that to the State Building Commission. Those are small things, sounds like small things, but they will have a dramatic impact on our ability to deliver projects on budget and on time.
Thank you. Chairman Zachary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. President Boyd, good to see you. And I've always, you can vote for me as can David, so I also want to say hey to David. It's great to see you guys. Thanks for both for being here. Without belaboring the point, Chair Lady Hazelwood actually asked some of the questions I was going to ask. But I'm going to just be really transparent. Looking at the budget, I was extremely concerned about the impact to higher ed based on the lack of funding, the capital projects, capital maintenance. And as I've talked to some of my colleagues, specifically related to UT, I mean, we've got enrollment is up, roughly
4%. 4% across the state.
Over about 5 years, though, we're up about 10%, right, at UT over a 5-year period.
Yes.
UT has one of the highest graduation rates of a 4-year institution, and just locally, obviously being in Knoxville, all that you do for literacy, all that you do for ag, the continued investment that UT makes in all 95 counties, it really, in my opinion, UT helps just higher ed in general as a state take it to be lifted to a different level. And so it's extremely concerning when we sit here and talk about a budget and we hear from those in higher ed that the impact this could have on stopping that momentum. And I just want to remind you and the other institutions that the budget we're looking at is a framework provided by the executive branch, but this is the legislature's budget. And I think we as a committee, at least talking to some of the colleagues that I have talked to, we see some of the deficiencies in the budget that could have a significant impact to higher ed. And if there is ever a time for a state to address certain needs, especially capital projects, it is a time like right now in the state of Tennessee where, because of our fiscal stewardship and conservative management of our state budget, we have a significant surplus, and now's the time to do that. And so I think that needs to be recognized and discussed, and we don't need to tiptoe around it. This budget does not provide higher ed with what it needs. And I think this committee and this body sees that, and I'm confident that we're going to take steps to address that. So really just my question, similar to what Chair Lady Hazelwood asked, is what beyond, maybe just even beyond funding, or what can we do to continue to help not only the University of Tennessee, but higher ed in general, just to continue a momentum that we see at the University of Tennessee, but also just to impact higher ed this year that really does have an impact that could go on for years to come.
Great. Thank you for that question. Actually, I do have a request. You can help us change the national narrative and the state narrative around the value of a college education. One of the things that is incredibly frustrating is when people say, you don't need to get a college degree anymore, you'll be just fine without it. And I want to answer a question that was asked earlier. The latest calculations show that if you get an associate's degree in your lifetime, you'll make $375,000 more. If you get a bachelor's degree, you'll make $1.5 million more. So there's concrete evidence that there is value over your lifetime in getting this college degree. I traveled the state promoting the UT Promise last fall, telling young kids, these seniors in high school, yeah, it sounds really great, a $20 a year job right out of high school, but the problem with that is 10 years from now, you'll still be making $20, and 40 years from now, or 20 years from now, you'll still be making the $20 an hour. For the betterment of your quality of life for your lifetime, you're better off spending that extra 2 and 4 years getting that additional degree. So we need to, you can help us promote the fact that college is worth going. There's a great return on investment, and we need to turn this college going rate from going down, going back up again. Thank you.
Last thing, Madam
Chairman
Chairman, I
Zachary.
promise. Just quickly, 2 things. One, and I texted you this, the one thing that has not gone up and has not kept up with inflation is the best value we have is the salary of the president of UT, which still remains at 0, which is the best value in state government.
I get paid what I'm worth, is what I'm told.
Yeah.
Chairman Zachary, I believe there's an effort underway to double that salary.
We can double it any time, and I think
yes.
he'll accept that. Yes, ma'am. Just again, to reiterate, I think this committee sees the importance. We value and recognize exactly what you said, the importance of continuing your education as a son who's getting ready to go on to college and hopefully pursue law school. It's extremely important. We recognize it, and the Drive to 55 has been, which was an initiative that started with you, has been one that has really been a catalyst for our state, and so we recognize that, and we appreciate the efforts, and we are going to do what we can to make adjustments in the budget accordingly. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Leader Lamberth.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Scout's honor, I'll be brief. President Boyd, just good to see you today. I appreciate everything UT does for our state, and just really good presentation, and I echo some of my colleagues' comments in that investing in all of you, but quite frankly, especially in the UT system, it's a bargain for the state of Tennessee. I say that as UT graduate, and I know most of us on this committee have ties to the University of Tennessee system. Love what you guys are doing. Just keep doing it, and I appreciate you, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the president? Leader Cochran.
Thank you, Chair.
Struggling with your title there.
Thank you. No, you're fine. Thank you, President Boyd. Thank you for being here as well. And just wanted to touch on what you had mentioned to Chairman Zachary, just about promoting the value of a college degree. And I certainly agree with you. I have two from UT Knoxville. I'm very, very proud of those. And so I think one of those narratives that we have to change, and I think this is something that you can help us with, and that UT and our other higher education institutions can help with, are really gearing down and marketing those degrees that do give you a leg up. Those degrees that when you graduate, you don't have, $70,000 in debt and really not a great salary. There are some of those degrees out there, but there are many in engineering and in various other various other fields of study that offer you a way to really change the trajectory of your life. And so I think I don't know, just to touch on what you said, I think sometimes all college degrees are right now are kind of lumped into that, to use an overused term, the underwater basket weaving classes that, when you graduate, they don't really provide you with a marketable skill. But again, I say UT because that's where I went. I know that there are many degrees that are extremely valuable, but we have to make sure that those are the ones that we're marketing to our high school students, to make sure those are the fields that they're going into, the ones that really change their lives. So appreciate you saying that, and maybe we can work together to kind of get that message out there.
Thank you.
Representative Lynn.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And I just wanted to make a comment. If I've heard it from one parent, I've heard it from dozens. And it's not just UT, it's the whole system. The indoctrination that students face in the classroom really angers parents. And I have a parent right now, she's a neighbor. She said, we're not sending our daughter to college. She's graduating this June. We're not sending her to college. She's not going to be indoctrinated like that. She is in high school college classes right now. She is. And the indoctrination that they see through that, she said, she's not going. And I think that's sad. I think that's sad. But that's just some food for thought for y'all. I don't know where these professors get it from. I have no idea where the source is. But I just have to speak up for the parents because it's very troubling to them when their student comes home and suddenly mom and dad literally know nothing.
There wasn't a question there, but can I make a comment to that, if I could? I'll be brief.
Certainly.
So we're committed to providing a culture of diversity of ideas, a marketplace of ideas. We want everyone to feel that they can express their views freely and have no indoctrination of any particular ideology. I think I can speak, I know I can speak for all the leadership of all the other institutions of higher education. We believe in diversity, but diversity in its broadest sense, diversity of ideas, diversity for people from all walks of life, for our veterans, for our first generation, for our students from rural communities, and we want to give them the support they need. We are opposed to any ideological indoctrination. So as a leadership, that's our position, and thanks to the legislature, last year you passed a bill that forbid us from being able to do that. So we have the leadership committed, and we have the state behind us. Not going to say that there may not be a case from time to time. I've got 12,000 employees, I think, and everyone else has even more than that combined. So there may be someone that maybe crosses the line from time to time, and when that happens, please make us aware. But we're committed to providing a place in which every person can feel free to share their thoughts without indoctrination.
Thank you, President Boyd. You've given us a lot to think about, along with your the presenters who went before you, and we appreciate your time this morning. And we do truly, we are certainly in a situation where the state gets a lot more than we pay for from your service. So thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you for my donut.
And now we're going to ask our friends from TBR to come forward, and this will complete our higher education focus. And I want to, for the record, note that two of the presenters today have been trained and trained well in Hamilton County and Chattanooga. That's why that was the launching pad for their astronomical careers, and we are very proud to be a part of that support process. So with that, Chancellor Toding, I will ask you to recognize or introduce members that you may have with you, and then go straight into the presentation.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you for allowing us to be here with you today, and for the support that we have garnered from this group and from the Senate and from the governor's office this year in the budget. We do have a short presentation that I want to go through. At the table joining me today on my far left are our Executive Director of Facilities, Dick Tracy. Our newest member of the TBR team is General Jeff Holmes, who is our Director of Projects and Planning. My Vice Chancellor for Business and Finance, Alicia Fox, and our Executive Director for Policy and Strategy, Mr. Russ Deaton, Dr. Russ Deaton, excuse me. Just to give you a quick update, I always like to talk to you a little bit about what we did with the money that you gave us last year. You will see here that we completed last year our strategic plan for the system office. The QR code that you see up at the top right-hand corner, if you click on that, it will take you directly to the full strategic plan for the Tennessee Board of Regents. But it was based on the 3 pillars of open access, completion, and community and workforce development. And our mission statement, you've heard us say it so many times, it is very simple: student success and workforce development. That is embodied in everything that we do every single day. This past year, the return on investment for the money that you've put into our TCATs last year and the capacity expansion that we had, you recall that there was a wait list that we talked a lot about with our TCATs. It was over 11,000 students when you provided this funding for us. Last year, we reduced that wait list by 4,000. This year alone, we've added an additional 2,124 students to that list. We've added 70 new TCAT faculty and 61 expanded facilities across the state. The enrollment for our TCATs from 2015 to 2022, you can see from this chart, it has gone up by 275% across the state. That is a tremendous enrollment increase that we've been able to manage and to provide in dual enrollment for our students. These are students that are still in high school that are taking some of our dual enrollment courses, and we are most grateful for the money that you put into dual enrollment last year for us to be able to do that. I've also talked to you every year about the warranty that we put in 5 years ago. If you'll recall, any student that graduates from a technical program of study from one of our colleges, if within 1 year an employer says they do not have the skills for which we say we have trained them, we will take them back and retrain them for free. To date, we have trained 46,209 warranties that we've given out. And I am so proud to tell you we are still at 0 claims. So every year I hold my breath. Next year when I come and tell you we've had a claim, again, I'll remind you that we see that as a good thing. We know it is a way that we can continue to improve the process in what we're doing. I also hear a good bit of talk from legislators and from others that community colleges don't have great retention and graduation rates. Well, you remember I started this slide with open access. That means we take every single person that walks in our door, regardless of where their starting point is when they come into the college. I'll remind you that 60% of the students that walk into our door need developmental studies, so they're already walking in needing a degree of extra support. But I'm also pretty proud to tell you that we average right around 47% of a graduation rate overall at our community colleges. That is well above the national average, and while it sounds terrible to say you're only graduating 47%, that means there's 40-something that are walking away from your door that are not graduating with you. We also know that many of them are transferring on to other institutions and are getting what they need from us to be successful when they go to another institution. And we also know that we have about a 7-year lag time, so that many students leave us and will come back within a 7-year period to finish a degree. So it is not as sad a news as it appears to be when you first look at it. But our technical colleges are a very different story. When you look at our TCATs, they do have a program completion rate of 76%, a job placement rate of 86%, and a licensure pass rate of 95%. That is a licensure pass rate on any national or state exam that is required for them to be employed in the field of study. So what they're doing extremely well. That's why we don't have any claims on our warranties. Again, a fact we're so proud of. In the governor's proposed budget, as you've heard talked about a lot, because it is an impressive number, there is $16.3 million in improvement in outcomes-based operating funding formula for our colleges, $13.3 million for the community colleges, and $3 million for our colleges of applied technology, and a $17.6 million improvement for partial funding, as you've heard the others talk about, for the 5% system-wide salary pool. And then the big item, the big ticket that we've all talked about is the $945 million capital outlay to fund the TCAP master plan. That breaks down to 29 projects across the state of Tennessee, projects ranging anywhere from a single building replacement to a full campus replacement and new site locations to expand our access and capacity. And I want to quickly tell you that this was not a list that was developed in a year. This was a strategic plan that has been ongoing for over 4 years. We started this prior to COVID. We look at every single campus. The master plan developer that worked with the campuses on this visits every campus. They analyze every single building that's on that campus, and then they also use the data from several sources, one primarily being Department of Labor, to look at where growth increases are projected to occur across the state. So we are projecting not only for what is happening today, but for what we also see as possible within the next several years across the state of Tennessee. To show you in even more detail, we broke this down by region, looking at the Grand Divisions and where the projects are located in the Grand Division. Each of you should have received a booklet that breaks down where those projects are within your region and what will be funded in your area. We do go from Memphis to Mountain City, and we do need to make sure that we are providing for all access for students across the state. The $50.6 million for capital maintenance was also included in this. That covers 15 projects at 13 of our community colleges and 24 projects at 14 of our TCATs. Again, those projects range from HVAC and plumbing upgrades to paving and science labs. It also included $7 million for inflationary increases for TCAP projects previously funded and currently underway. I've heard you talk a lot about inflationary numbers, and I would like to share with you that that is a large part of the thought process we've had when we developed the numbers that went into our projects, into our TCAP master plan. We have been calculating for those increases over the last several years, and we have not had to come back and ask for an increase in funding on those projects. And I will attribute that to the great work that our facilities department does. They are very much in touch with what is happening within the building world and looking at those cost increases and how we plan for that. We work to stay within scope on our projects so that we can make sure we are doing our best. Now, we don't have a crystal ball. We do not know what the economy will continue to do, but we have placed emphasis on trying to make sure that we are able to get these projects up and running. Our facilities department also did a great job in looking at how we would bring to scale the number of projects. I have been asked by a number of people, is it even possible for you to spend that kind of money in the amount of time? Yes, it is absolutely possible for us to do that. That is not a stretch for the Tennessee Board of Regents. We are used to handling a large number of projects. If you will recall, prior to the Focus Act, we handled all of the facilities for the entire states except for the UT system. So we are still prepared to do that at a very high level. We are also looking at how we can group those projects into take smaller projects and group them into larger packages so that we can make the most of bids when we put them out, and how we can bring that to scale over the next 1.5 to 2 years. $9.5 million was included in this project for the equipment to go into the TCAT at the Blue Oval City campus. I will also share with you that we are working directly with Ford and SK for donations of equipment. Ford is going to be donating some of the large cell packages that will go into the training in that facility, and SK is working on what their donations will be. We're still not quite sure with SK because that's taking a little bit longer development, but we know that they will also be putting equipment into that building. There was a $1.14 million for increased enrollment in the Correctional Education Investment Initiative. We graduated 150 correctional individuals last year and have 450 currently in the pipeline. The governor did include in his budget 350 recurring for that project and another 790 for non-recurring for us to be able to expand what we're doing with training in the prisons throughout the state of Tennessee. The 23-24 budget proposal did make major investments in higher education, including what we are calling a generational historic investment in improving our TCATs across the state. Our board and our college could not be more grateful to the governor and to you for considering to move this forward. I appreciate President Boyd's remarks on that he also sees the importance of this, and I will quickly say we never want to take money from the LGIs or UT because it is all important. But we have been the ones that were not funded at the highest rate over a number of years, and so I do see this as a way to play catch-up to get us to the level that we need to be. In order to make sure that we are continuing to be a leader in workforce training education in the state of Tennessee. Madam Chair, that completes our formal remarks, and we'll welcome any questions that you might have today.
Thank you so much, and we do have a number of questions, but again, I think a number of people on this committee, including myself, have been strong proponents of TCAT for a number of years and have fought hard for some things like security and other issues at the TCAT. And I'm going to start out with the question and hope that I'm not stepping on anyone else's toes who might have had this in their list. But in this budget proposal, and I've asked this question a couple of times and got a couple of different answers, so I'm just trying to figure out with the capital expenditures for the TCATs across the state, do those monies include the equipment? You mentioned equipment from Ford and SK, but in those other many TCATs across the state who are not going to be training for those particular employers, do those dollars include the technology and the equipment that goes inside? And is there a proposal or a plan for maintenance for upgrades of that going forward?
Yes, and thank you for that. These figures do include equipment cost that you see here, and that is when we do program planning, we include that in it in a normal process. If you'll recall, the TCAT at Blue Oval City came into the process a little differently. It was one that was included as part of a package that when Ford decided to choose that location. So that number that was used to build that facility was one that was just based on what it cost to build the Nissan facility 15 years ago. We weren't really brought into the process until after the negotiations had taken place. And so we knew that in order to get the building built, it was going to take every dime of that dollar to build the facility. And so discussions were had. We knew we didn't need the equipment money in that first year, and so it was recommended to us to come back and ask for the equipment money once the building was up and running. So that's the reason why you didn't see that included in that particular project. It was not part of our normal cycle. Normally, we always include equipment in our budget cost.
Thank you for that. Leader Cochran.
Thank you, Chair Lady. Chancellor Tidings, thank you for being with us this morning. I've got a few questions for you. Before I get into those, I did want to compliment the recent hire of Susan Hotto at the Athens TCAT. I was a little nervous when the Michigan transplant was coming to rural East Tennessee. I wasn't sure, but when she pulled up in that four-wheel drive Dodge truck, we knew that she was going to be okay. She's extremely sharp, and she's already diving into the community, and we think she's going to do a great job. So thank you for sending her to McMinn County. So last year, so about $3 million of funding was provided for TCAT security. Can you kind of give us an update, just the current state of that security, throughout those campuses and community colleges?
Yes, again, thank you for asking that. We were able to do with that money, our discussion was that we needed to stand up a police department that was located at the system office that would oversee all of the technical colleges. They do not have police departments. They operate on very slim budgets. We do have that stood up. We have hired the chief of police that is overseeing all of our technical colleges. We have hired almost all of the police officers at the local level for the technical colleges. I think we've still got about 3 or 4 that have not actually hired the individual but are in the process of doing that. And that's what the majority of that money went to do. We also are working with Homeland Security on a communication system. They have been so gracious to work with us and give us some of their older product to be able to use so that we're tied into that system with them and can be very responsive in a much more succinct manner than we've ever been able to do in the past. So thank you.
Awesome.
Leader Cochran.
Thank you, Chair Lady. And so also, TCAT had some issues with some wait lists for certain programs. We provided about $19.4 million to reduce that. So can you kind of tell us the status of wait lists at TCAT statewide, and then just maybe some of the current enrollment trends at TCAT and what are those projected trends as we move into the future?
Yes, absolutely. And again, thank you. The TCAT wait list, as I have mentioned to you before, was at 11,500 when we started that process. We're down now to 6,000 students on a wait list. So we have reduced that down in a year and a half by that number, and that was reflected in the number of faculty that you saw we were able to add. We did that in a lot of cases. What we're doing is double use of labs. We're having students on some days, they're not actually physically coming into the campus. They are doing their lectures online, and then when they do come into the campus, they're doing the hands-on component in the classroom because we were out of space. So we were having to maintain and use the facilities 24/7 in order to reach that number at this point. Going forward, this capital project that is being proposed will allow us to continue to grow and reduce that number even further.
And then just one more, if you don't mind. And then could you maybe tell us the TCATs that are experiencing the highest enrollment and maybe have the longest wait list? And I guess you could maybe answer that a couple different ways, specific TCATs, and then maybe you could talk about the programs that are maybe driving those wait lists. And then also, can you tell us maybe the ones that have lower enrollment?
I can get that chart to you would be the best way for me to do that for all 27 of them because we do have that information. I can tell you that the programs that have the longest wait list right now are industrial systems and welding. Those are the two that the most individuals are trying to get into.
And a follow-up on that, we have the wait list that you're cutting down. What about graduation placement rate for those who complete the TCAT, get their certificate or associate's degree or whatever it might be? What is the placement rate for those individuals to be employed?
86%. 86% placement rate. And another initiative in addition to the welding and the industrial maintenance that I'd like to mention to you is the truck driving. We know that there is a massive shortage of truck drivers throughout the nation. I always find that hard to believe when I'm on 24 that there's a shortage, but there is. We are working with TDOT and with safety on that to reduce the amount of time it takes for the individuals to go that have completed their training to go and get their certificate, their license that they have to get on the road. We are also going to be starting a massive campaign called Trucking Tennessee to try and recruit more individuals to come into the truck driving program. And we are working with our local and statewide employers that are sponsoring that for us.
And a follow-up to my follow-up, 86% is amazing placement rate, but 14% of a large number is still a lot of people. So do we track what happens with those? Do they come back for additional training? What are some of the reasons for the non-placement of that 14% of individuals?
And when we say that 80%, those are the ones that we are actually able to verify as being employed. We know that there are individuals that are employed actually using the skills that they learn from us, but they are not in a job title or Department of Labor job that we're able to actually go in and count. There are individuals that are self-employed sometimes that we're not able to reflect in those numbers. Cosmetology is one area that we know we have a lot of people that they get that degree and then they go out and work on their own, not necessarily in any type of way that we're able to reflect a number. So there's some give and take there in that we know they're actually using the skills. Welders quite often may not be reflected in that number because they're doing a job that's not actually listed as a welding position.
Thank you. Chairman Baum.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, Chancellor Tidings. I think you're right. The one single number that jumps out at us the most is the $1 billion figure for capital projects, renovations, 6 new TCAT centers. And so I think that's what I'd like to ask you about. Can you tell us a little bit about your trends in enrollment? I think we're trying to figure out whether 6 new TCAT centers is sort of a proportional increase to the change in enrollment. I know you've had a slide up there a moment ago, but I think that was dual enrollment. I think we're interested in total enrollment change, increase.
We continue to go up in enrollment in our technical colleges. And one thing that I'd like to point out, I mean, some of these buildings will not be to increase enrollment. They will be to replace buildings that are, as have been brought to your attention, 60-plus years in age and have reached their end-of-life expectancy. Many of our technical colleges, when they were built 60 years ago, were built with what was actually considered a high school training format. They were under the Board of Education at that time, and they were built like a high school, not for the use that we're using them today. They're not able to be retrofitted in many cases because of the infrastructure of that building. It doesn't lend itself to go in and do a renovation to it. We train very differently than we did 60 years ago to put people to work, so it's not going to necessarily yield a one-to-one increase in student population, but we still have students trying to attend that we do need to accommodate that growth for as well. Primarily driven by workforce is a lot of what our training needs to look like now.
Yes, and I understand that, and that does make sense. If you had to give us a number for enrollment increase over like about the last 5 years, what would it be approximately?
We've run right around 2% to flat, whereas everybody else was decreasing. We were still, during the COVID years, we held steady in enrollment.
And I should know, how many TCAT centers do we currently have?
We had 24, and you may wonder why that, I'm not saying 27, as I used to always say, and that's because we've been combining administrative functions of some of our technical colleges. That does not mean I reduced those technical colleges, but what I did is I put one president over what was in the past 2 technical colleges, because we don't need to pay for administration if we can very easily handle that with one president. And so we've been combining them. We have combined, we're in the process of doing 3 major combinations.
Okay, that's helpful. I think we're trying to see 6 new centers, TCAT centers, 24 existing, about a 25% increase. Maybe next question. Are you confident that we could spend $1 billion in a year, or is this something that might be allocated, but it's really not possible to spend that amount of money in one year because of labor shortages, maybe shortages in materials in the supply chain?
Those things are absolutely true, and we are facing them every day, that there are those kinds of issues. But what is really important to remember is that in order to start the bid process to get this money encumbered, we have to have the money allocated. We cannot make a bid and go out to start the process unless the money has been allocated for which to do that. It will take us a couple of years to spend all of the dollars out. We know that. We're looking at a projection of 2025 to have this process. But we have a process, and again, a very streamlined process, and one in which we are accustomed to spending that kind of money. While $1 billion sounds like a lot, remember that you spent over $1 billion last year for the LGIs and UT, and they all had to go out and compete for those projects as well. So it does sound like it is a lot of money. I mean, there's no way to say that's not a lot of money, but yes, I feel very confident. I also want to say that that doesn't wipe the state clean of never needing any more TCATs, because we have some other areas that we've got some really important processes that we need to go through. This book represents the work that's been done over the last 4 years. We're still looking at areas in the state that are going to still need to have some attention paid to them, and we will be continuing to do that.
Okay, and Madam Chair, I've got 1 or 2 more questions if I could ask.
We are out of time, but we're going to go through as quickly as possible.
Maybe I'll combine them into one. Last year's budget had almost $500 million appropriated for TCAT centers. Can you give us an update on this? And maybe my last question, what can we expect as a return on this investment? Is there something we can measure to see how these allocations are paying off?
Yes, sir. We do have an update on where we are with those projects. They are all on time, on budget, moving forward. So all the ones that were allocated last year, we have in process, moving forward. As the governor said in his State of the State, our projection is when we get all of this in place, we hope to have increased our TCAT expansion, or the number of people we are putting into the workforce, by 10,000 every year.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Baum. Chairman Boyd.
Thank
And
you,
we
Madam.
are out of time, so if you have a burning question, please let me know. If it's something that can wait, then we will get it to our illustrious budget person, Mrs. Himes, and she has some other questions that we did not get to of our own. We will add your question to that if you can possibly wait. Otherwise, if you've got to know today, keep your hand up and let me know. Thank you, Chairman Boyd.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. I will keep this brief, and it's regarding community colleges and your dual enrollment. Are y'all partnering with high schools, and then the high school teachers are teaching it, or do y'all actually have folks on campus that do dual enrollment?
We have a little bit of all of that going on. Sometimes it is a high school instructor that is at the college, at the high school setting, but they have been certified by the college to teach the course. They are teaching the college level course. It's just that we're very fortunate that there are some high school teachers that have the credentials to be able to do that. The majority of them are our college faculty that are going in to teach the courses for dual enrollment. Dual credit is a different process where the high school is teaching the competencies, and we look at those competencies to see if we're able to articulate that in for dual credit. Our goal is to never have a student repeat a competency that they've already acquired and to help them move forward.
Representative Sparks.
Yeah, my question is kind of burning, Chairman. Real quick, I appreciate what y'all do, really do. The TCATs matter to me and many others. Just real quick, share the success of Smyrna and Nissan TCAT. And I know Representative Johnny Shaw would like to hear it because of the Blue Oval. And after that, if General Holmes could share the road that's named out front and why that matters, Sergeant Freddie Hahn. So just tell us the success of Smyrna, please.
Absolutely, and obviously, you know, that's a tremendous partnership with Nissan and the work that we've been doing there. We also were very fortunate a year ago to have Haas Manufacturing put new equipment into that building for us because that's equipment that they're using on the Nissan floor. So we have a partnership with the local high schools, with Motlow State, with TCAT Murfreesboro, working in that area to make sure that we're doing the training to fill the needs for what is going on at TCAT or at Nissan. Nissan was very instrumental in talking with Ford so that they understood that we do provide a trained workforce for them, so that when Ford was looking at the state of Tennessee, they had a lot of conversations with Nissan to say, is this real? Can you actually meet our workforce demands? And that was part of the success.
Madam Chair, leaders, I'll keep it brief. Sergeant Freddie Hahn was one of my soldiers who got killed in Iraq. And Freddie Hahn represents everything that's good about America. Blue-collar worker, family man, 2 young sons, early age, 10 and 12, who have now grown on to be successful. And so Angie, his wife, has moved. She continues to, we continue to remember her and the entire family as we do all of our Gold Star families across the state. That's why the road is named for Sergeant Hahn. And as with all the bridges along I-840 in Middle Tennessee, each one of those bridges are named for a fallen hero of ours. So our citizens at any point in time that they travel that route will look at that sign and remember that freedom is not free, and it's born on the back of a lot of great Americans such as Sergeant Hahn. Thank you, ma'am.
Real quick, for the record, I trained that guy at Nissan. He took my place. He got killed in Iraq.
Representative Sparks,
and I came to
we
the
really
Capitol.
appreciate
Thank
his
you.
service, but and those of all of those who, as the general has mentioned, are recognized on our bridges and roads across the state, not just on I-40, but I think we probably have some of those in our hometowns as well. So, Representative Barrett, is your question burning?
Forgive me, Madam Chair, it's not a burning question so much as a burning comment to address a question that was asked by Chairman Baum. First of all, I would like to say that Dr. Rita Summers at TCAT Dixon is an absolute superstar and vital to our community. I represent a very largely rural district. TCAT Hohenwald and TCAT Dixon are extremely important, and the relationships that we have with Nashville State and Columbia State are also extremely important. So one of the questions was, is this money necessary when you've had money that was allocated before? Just looking at Dixon and Lewis County, we're looking at about $84 million in investment. The relationship between TCAT and Nashville State with the nursing program in Dixon County is an example of why this is necessary. Freed-Hardeman had a nursing program and a relationship with Nashville State, and Freed-Hardeman pulled out of our community. Horizon Medical Center relies on the nurses that are trained in that facility to staff that hospital. And if we don't fund this project, and if we don't create a place for that program to survive and stay in Dixon County, we're going to have an extremely difficult time filling those positions in that facility in Dixon that serves a 5-county region. So this is money that we are spending that is vital to these rural communities, and I hope that the folks on this committee will pay attention to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Barrett, and thank you, Chancellor Tidings and your team. Also, we didn't have an opportunity today. We focused on TCATs for obvious reasons, but we may send some questions your way regarding community colleges, because I know the enrollment there is, the trend is in the other direction, and would just be interested in seeing what, and again, this we just don't have time to go into it, but just be prepared for some questions regarding community college enrollment and whether there's an opportunity to shift resources from community colleges to TCATs, or if that's doable. I know Chattanooga is the only place where they're co-located, so it's not as easy in other places. But thank you again for being here. And we're going to ask the Department of Commerce and Insurance to come forward, and I apologize in advance for our short time. Would ask that you make your presentation as succinct as possible. As soon as you're set up, if you would please just
Chair Lady, I understand we don't have slides, so.
That's probably why we can't get them up. Sometimes it works that way. If you all would just begin your presentation, please. Introduce yourselves, and then we'll just go forward, and we're going to plow through this quickly. We have another group coming in here, and we have Finance Sub. Chairman Hicks will be very upset with me if I keep his people over because we have to move rooms.
Yes, ma'am, understood. I understand we were asked to keep it under 5 minutes, and I'm definitely there. So plenty of time for questions as well. And good morning. My name is Carter Lawrence. I have the pleasure of serving as the commissioner. I'm joined here by Toby Compton, who is a deputy commissioner in the department, and then also by Kimberly Whaley, who is a director for us and is sitting in while the assistant commissioner is attending a funeral. So again, good morning, Chair Lady Hazelwood, Vice Chair Baum, and to all of the committee members. Appreciate the opportunity to be here with you and to present about the governor's proposed budget as it deals with commerce and insurance. And we always talk about what a privilege and honor it is to get to serve all 7 million Tennesseans in the different ways that we do, which includes overseeing insurance and financial securities, managing the state fire marshal's office, some 40 professions of occupational licensure that represent approximately 300,000 Tennesseans within the regulatory boards division. Of course, we also have the Fire and Codes Academy, the Firefighting Commission, Law Enforcement Training Academy, Peace Officer Standards and Training Commission, TennCare Oversight Division, and the administratively attached Tennessee Emergency Communications Board. So we really do have a diverse range that impact most Tennesseans on a daily basis. So moving on now to the budget proposal, I just want to highlight some of the increases that are before your consideration. We are again asking for an investment in Tennesseans' health and safety, as well as efficient departmental operations. In the area of life safety, we're asking for 19 positions for the State Fire Marshal's Office. 8 of those will be dedicated to handle additional codes inspections, particularly for schools and other state facilities. 11 of those positions will create exciting opportunity for the department to further our commitment to Tennessee's volunteer fire service. With those new positions, we'd be able to provide 100% free training to Tennessee's volunteer firefighters. These men and women give their time, and these positions, paired with the volunteer educational incentive pay, will continue to move the needle forward in terms of lives saved and property protected. Additionally, we're proposing $30 million for law enforcement recruitment and retention. The governor proposed and the General Assembly appropriated $30 million last year, and we're preparing to redouble our efforts to ensure that we're bringing the next generation of Tennessee's law enforcement into public service and trained as well as possible. For items designed to increase departmental efficiency, we're asking for funds to convert legacy systems to be fully integrated and managed online. We're also asking for 2 financial analyst positions for our captive insurance section and 1 position for our securities division to ensure effective consumer protection. Our supplemental request for the fiscal year 22-23 is $450,000 for the resurfacing of the emergency vehicle operations track at the Tennessee Law Enforcement Training Academy. This EVOC track was in use 47 of the last 55 weeks by our Toledo cadets, so you can imagine the wear and tear that it's undergoing. We're in the process of hosting a series of meetings at Toledo so members can get a firsthand look at our facility as we look forward to the new multi-agency law enforcement training academy. Since becoming commissioner over 2 years ago, wow, sorry, just gave myself a lot more time. Time flies when you're having fun. Over 2 years, I've made it a goal to be responsive, collaborative, and creative in the shared ways that we serve constituents. I look forward to continuing that healthy relationship with the General Assembly and appreciate your leadership as we all share the goal of serving Tennesseans. So as I mentioned earlier, our entire executive team is here, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. And again, appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you for your brevity, and we do have questioners on our list, beginning with Representative Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I understand that serving as a commissioner may work like dog years, so that may be why it's 10 years. So, on the questionnaire that was submitted, it looks like there in fiscal year 23-24, you're asking for 22 new positions, but looking back, there's 106 vacant positions in 22-23. 110 in 21-22, 101 or 104 in 2021, and in 40 or more of those have been vacant for more than a year. So can these vacancies be reclassified rather than new positions being created within the department? And if they can't be reclassified, then why not?
So thank you for the question, and that's one of those things that when I joined 10 years ago, I'm joking, 2 years ago, that it always struck me, well, we've got positions over in this division, why can't we just the understanding that I came to eventually was that when the General Assembly does pass the legislation to give us the positions, therefore that specific one that was contemplated. So the vacancies that we have are throughout the entire department, where we have 7 different divisions and the subsections within it. The ones that we're asking for are specific to the State Fire Marshal's Office, which does not have sufficient vacancies to be able to meet these increased needs. So we did give up a lot of positions recently through, I believe that was actually 2 years ago when the General Assembly and Governor focused on taking away long-term vacant positions, and we continue to try and make sure that we're appropriately using those. But in this specific case, we do not have the positions we need in the State Fire Marshal's Office, and so that's why we are requesting these.
Chairman Crawford.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. As you mentioned earlier, the $30 million appropriation that we did last year, can you give us a brief update on that as to how many law enforcement agencies have received this funding and how did they go about applying for it?
Yes, sir. Let me preemptively ask Chip Kane, who's the director of TLEADA, the Tennessee Law Enforcement Training Academy, and also the executive secretary of the Peace Officer Standards and Training Commission, to come up. I will say, and Chip, please do build upon my answer, but just to kind of broadly set the groundworks, we started preparing in advance of the passage of last year's budget for this, hoping, anticipating that the General Assembly would approve the governor's request of that $30 million. And the direction that we started to go with that was that we were going to have to promulgate rules in order to be able to make that money available. So we were moving that direction for quite a while, which, as you know, involves a lot of parties and can take quite some time. However, as we were continuing down the path of moving towards rules, we found out that we actually did not have to promulgate rules and that we were able to, under some internal authority, be able to come up with the parameters for making that money available for the recruiting and retention. So all that to say, we kind of had to reset fairly recently about how that money was going to be made available for recruiting and retention. So having set the 30,000, Chip, would you please provide the more specific context for how we're making that available?
Certainly. Chip Kane, Director of Tennessee Law Enforcement Training Academy. So when the commissioner talked about the rules, we drafted some rules and then wound up not having to use those. Right now, we're working through a process called, I guess the document is the Delegated Grant Authority. And so we are very late in that process. We're very advanced in that. The hope is that sometime around May was the last estimate that I was given, that we would be able to open this up to law enforcement agencies in the state. So we expect that conservative estimate would be about 3,000 law enforcement officers approximately would benefit from that first pool of $30 million, and then again about another 3,000 approximately from that second appropriation if the General Assembly does move forward with that. So we've worked out a very good plan that will provide a $10,000 bonus to certified law enforcement officers from other states and from within the state of Tennessee that have had at least a one-year break in service. What we don't want to encourage is people to leave one department for another, so that one-year break is important there. And then an $8,000 bonus for never certified law enforcement officers, citizens of Tennessee that want to join the ranks. So it's going to be a very good plan for Tennessee, and I can't wait to get the process started. It'll be a very easy process. The departments will fill out the delegated or the grant contract once, and then the academy and post will try to work on minimizing the I guess you could say the bureaucracy for the departments on the back end.
Thank you, Chairman Hicks.
Thank you, Chair Lady, Commissioner. Good to see you. Quick question regarding security brokers, agents, and companies' fees. If you look at the fiscal year 21-22 departmental budget, I think it was budgeted $3.5 million for the securities brokers, agents, and companies registration fee revenue. But looking at that actual that's going to be collected, $27.4 million. Can you talk about the discrepancy there?
Phenomenal question, and I'm going to ask Elizabeth Bowling, who is the Assistant Commissioner for the Securities Division, to come up. Elizabeth, if you would, please.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Bowling. I'm the Assistant Commissioner for the Securities Division. The money that we bring in, the $27 million, I believe that you're referencing, those are from registration fees for broker-dealers, investment advisors, agents, and investment advisor representatives. And Kimberly can, that money, I believe, goes to the general fund and does not remain in the Securities Division's budget.
Can you talk about why was it only budgeted at 3.5, yet we see that huge discrepancy there?
That does not go through our budget. I mean, it is, the budget for the division to operate is separate and apart. Does Kimberly?
I think we're trying to understand why the increase in revenues from a projected 3 million to 27 million.
That's been steady for the past several years. We have had increase in registrations, but in previous years, our registration fees that we've received have been around the 27 million mark.
Okay. Not the answer I'm looking for. We may need to talk a little bit more offline because that still doesn't make, just to me, a lick of sense. So if we could maybe get off the record somewhere. And
Well, Representative, if I might add a little more color, the 27, so what you're hearing, the 27 is the total that we are bringing in through the securities registrations that we're passing on to the general fund. The 3.5 is related to the budget that it takes in order for Elizabeth and her team to run the shop of doing the regulation of the securities industry.
Yes, I'm sorry if I was not clear on that.
Okay, that's clear. Thank you. Thank you very
I
much.
apologize for the confusion on our
Nope,
part.
not a problem. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I know that we have some additional questions. Just in the interest of time, we will forward those in writing, Commissioner, and we thank you for your patience here today, for your presence. But we are out of time, and we are going back into session. And I'd like to recognize Chairman Hicks.
Thank you, Chair Lady. Members of the Budget Subcommittee, just letting you know we're going to be getting started in about 2 minutes. So you've got plenty of time to walk your way over to House Hearing Room 3. Thank you.
Thank you. That does complete our calendar for today. I see no further business. We are adjourned.